Classification of biogeochemical cycles. Water or hydrologic cycle. The hydrologic cycle involves the continuous circulation of water in the Earth's atmosphere system and is driven by solar energy, resulting from direct evaporation and through evapotranspiration. The continuous movement of water in the biosphere is called the water cycle, that is, hydrological cycle. Resulting from direct evaporation and through evapotranspiration. Water is not evenly distributed throughout the surface of the earth. Almost 95% of the total water on the earth is chemically bound to rocks and does not cycle. Out of the remaining 5%, nearly 97.3% is in the oceans and 2.1% exists as polar ice caps. Thus, only 0.6% is present as fresh water in the form of atmospheric water vapors, ground and soil water. The driving forces of water cycle are solar radiation and gravity. Water moves from one reservoir to another reservoir by the process of evaporation, transpiration, condensation, precipitation, deposition, runoff, infiltration, and groundwater flow. However, evaporation and precipitation are two main processes involved in the water cycle. These two processes alternate with each other. Carbon cycle. The source of all carbon is carbon dioxide present in the atmosphere. Life cannot exist without carbon dioxide as it is vital for the production of carbohydrates through photosynthesis by plants. This element anchors all organic substances from coal, oil to DNA. It is highly soluble in water. Therefore, oceans also contain large quantities of dissolved carbon dioxide. Carbon cycle involves a continuous exchange of carbon between the atmosphere and organisms. The global carbon cycle consists of the following steps. Photosynthesis. Green plants in the presence of sunlight utilize carbon dioxide in the process of photosynthesis and convert the inorganic carbon into organic matter, food, and release oxygen. A part of the food made through photosynthesis is used by plants their own metabolism and rest is stored as their biomass, which is available to various herbivores, heterotrophs, including human beings and microorganisms as food. Respiration. Respiration is carried out by all living organisms, animals, and plants as well. It is a metabolic process where food is oxidized to liberate energy, carbon dioxide, and water. The energy released from respiration is used for carrying out life processes by a living organism. Thus, carbon dioxide is released into atmosphere through this process. Decomposition. All the food assimilated by animals or synthesized by plant is not metabolized by them completely. A major part is retained by them as their own biomass, which becomes available to decomposers on their death. The dead organic matter is decomposed by microorganisms and carbon dioxide is released into the atmosphere by decomposers. Combustion. Burning of biomass releases carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. Nitrogen cycle. It is an essential constituent of protein and is a basic building block of all living tissues. Our atmosphere contains nearly 79% of nitrogen, but it cannot be used directly by the majority of the living organisms. Nitrogen cycles from the gaseous phase to solid phase, then back to gaseous phase through the activity of a wide variety of organisms. Cycling of nitrogen is vitally important for all living organisms. There are five main processes which essential for nitrogen cycle are elaborated below. Nitrogen fixation. This process involves the conversion of gaseous nitrogen into ammonia, a form in which it can be used by plants. Atmospheric nitrogen can be fixed by the following three methods. Atmospheric fixation 1. By the lightning combustion and volcanic activity, the periodic thunderstorms convert the gaseous nitrogen in the atmosphere to ammonia and nitrates, which later reaches the Earth's surface through precipitation and then into the soil and are utilized by the plants. 2. Industrial fixation. At high temperature and high pressure, molecular nitrogen is broken into atomic nitrogen, which then combines with hydrogen to form ammonia. Bacterial fixation. There are two types of bacteria. Symbiotic bacteria, namely rhizobium, in the root nodules of leguminous plants. Free living or symbiotic example, nostoc, acidobacter, and cyanobacteria. Nitrification. It is a process by which ammonia is converted into nitrates or nitrites. It is done by Nitrosomonas and Nitrococcus bacteria respectively. Another soil bacteria, Nitrobacter, can convert nitrate into nitrite. Assimilation. In this process, nitrogen fixed by plants is converted into organic molecules such as proteins, DNA, RNA, etc. These molecules make the plant and animal tissue. Ammonification. Living organisms produce nitrogenous waste products such as urea and uric acid. These waste products, as well as dead remains of organisms, are converted back into inorganic ammonia by the bacteria. Ammonifying bacteria help in this process. The bacteria that accomplish it are Bacillus, Clostridium proteus, Pseudomonas, and Streptomyces. Denitrification, conversion of nitrates back into the gaseous nitrogen is called as denitrification. Denitrifying bacteria live deep in the soil near the water table as they like to live in an oxygen-free medium. Denitrification is the reverse of nitrogen fixation. In the soil, even oceans, there are a few special denitrifying bacteria, example Pseudomonas, which can convert the nitrites to elemental nitrogen. This nitrogen, which is in the gaseous form, escapes into the atmosphere, thus completing the cycle. Sedimentary cycles. Phosphorus cycle. Phosphorus plays an important role in aquatic ecosystems and water quality. Phosphorus occurs in large amounts as a mineral in phosphate rocks and enters the cycle due to erosion and mining activities. This nutrient is considered to be the main cause of excessive growth of rooted and free-floating microscopic plants in lakes. Phosphorus is mainly stored in the Earth's crust. It is usually found in the form of phosphates on land. Through the processes like weathering and erosion, phosphates enter rivers and streams and are eventually transported to the ocean. In the ocean, the phosphorus accumulates on continental shelves in the form of insoluble deposits. Only after millions of years, the crustal plates rise from the seafloor and expose the phosphates on land. Eventually, weathering will release them from rock and the cycle's geochemical phase begins again. Sulfur cycle. Soil is the natural reservoir for sulfur. Its sediments are locked in organic coal, oil, and peat, and inorganic deposits, pyrite rock, and sulfur rock, in the form of sulfates, sulfides, and organic sulfur. It is primarily released by weathering of rocks, erosional runoff, and decomposition of organic matter, and is carried to terrestrial and aquatic ecosystems in salt solution. The sulfur cycle is mostly sedimentary except two of its compounds, hydrogen sulfide and sulfur dioxide, which adds a gaseous component to its normal sedimentary cycle. Atmospheric sulfur dioxide is carried back to the earth after being dissolved in rainwater, which forms weak sulfuric acid. Sulfur in the form of sulfates is utilized by the plants. Sulfates are incorporated through a series of metabolic processes into sulfur-bearing amino acid, which eventually is incorporated in the proteins of autotroph tissues. and then it passes through the grazing food chain. Sulfur bound in living organisms is carried back to the soil, to the bottom of ponds and lakes, and to the seas through excretion and decomposition of dead organic material. Ecological succession. Ecological succession, the process by which communities of plant and animal species in an area are replaced or changed into another over a period of time, is known as ecological succession. Both the biotic and abiotic components are involved in this change. This change is brought about both by the activities of communities as well as by the physical environment in that particular area. The physical environment often influences the nature, direction, rate, and optimal limit of changes. During succession, both the plant and animal communities undergo change. There are the following two types of successions: primary succession and secondary succession. The first organism, usually plant, which colonize an area is called the pioneer community. The final stage of succession is called the climax community. The stage which leads to the climax community is called successional stage or seer. Ecological succession is characterized by the following: increased productivity, the shift of nutrients from the reservoirs, increased diversity of organisms with increased development of niche, and a consequent increase in the complexity of food webs. Succession occurs faster in area existing in the middle part of a large continent. This is because here all communities and seeds of plants belonging to the different seeds se- would reach much faster, established, and ultimately result in the climax community. Primary succession. Primary succession takes place where no community has existed previously. For example, over a bare or unoccupied area such as rocks, outcrop, newly formed deltas and sand dunes, emerging volcano islands, and lava flows as well as glacial moraines. The plants that invade first bare land where the soil is initially absent are called pioneer species. The assemblage of pioneer plants is collectively called pioneer community. The pioneer community after some time gets replaced by another community with different species combination. This second community gets replaced by a third community. This process continues sequence wise in which a community replaced previously by another community. Each transitional temporary community that is formed and replaced during succession is called a stage in succession or a seral community. The terminal, final stage of succession forms the community which is called a climax community. The entire sequence of communities in a given area succeeding each other during the course of succession is termed series. Orderly sequence of primary succession. First, pioneer stages. Pioneer species or community, high growth rate but short lifespan, bare rocks, lichens, small annual plants, perennial herbs, grasses. Intermediate stages, sterile community, temporary community, grasses, shrubs, shade intolerant trees. Climax community, terminal or final community, stable, mature, more complex and long-lasting shade-tolerant trees. Secondary secession. Secondary secession occurs in areas where a community that previously existed has been removed. It is typified by smaller scale disturbances that do not eliminate all life and nutrients from the environment. So, partial destruction of the existing community occurs. Most of the times, hardy species of grasses would be the first to invade the abandoned land as it can survive in bare, sun-baked soil. Tall grasses and herbaceous plants soon join these hardy grasses. These together dominate the ecosystem for some years, along with rabbits, mice, insects, and seed-eating birds. Eventually, some trees come up in this area, seeds of which may be brought by wind, birds, or animals. And over the years, a forest community develops. Thus, the abandoned farmland over a period becomes dominated by trees and can be transformed into a forest. Primary succession takes a very long time as compared to secondary succession, as the soil is to be formed during primary succession, while secondary succession starts in an area where soil is already present. Secondary succession is relatively fast as the soil has necessary nutrients as well as large pool of seeds. And other dormant stages of organisms. Different types of succession. Autogenic and allogenic. When succession is caused by living inhabitants of that community itself, the process is called as autogenic succession, while change brought about by external forces is known as allogenic succession. Xerarch and hydrarch. Succession that occurs on land where moisture content is low, for example, on bare rock, is known as xerarch. Succession that takes place in a water body like ponds or lake is called hydrarch. Autotrophic and heterotrophic. Succession in which green plants initially are much greater in quantity is known as autotrophic succession, and the ones in which the heterotrophs are greater in quantity is known as heterotrophic succession. Homeostasis. Ecosystems are capable of maintaining their state of equilibrium. They can regulate their own species, structure, and functional processes. This capacity of the ecosystem of self regulation is known as homeostasis. In other words, homeostasis can be described as the tendency for a biological system to resist changes. In a homeostatic system, the negative feedback mechanism is responsible for maintaining stability in an ecosystem. Homeostasis is an in an pond ecosystem. A large number of phytoplankton increase the population of zooplankton due to excess food available that causes reduction in phytoplankton. The population of the zooplanktons decreases due to starvation. The population of the phytoplankton starts increasing due to less consumption. Classification of ecosystems. Ecosystems classified into two, natural and man-made. Natural ones are totally dependent on solar radiation, like forest, grasslands, oceans, lakes, rivers, and deserts. Dependent on solar radiation and energy subsidies are tropical rainforests, tidal estuaries, and coral reefs. Man-made are dependent on solar energy, agricultural fields, and aquaculture ponds. Those dependent on the fossil fuel are urban and industrial ecosystems. Natural ecosystem. A natural ecosystem is an assemblage of plants and animals which functions as a unit and is capable of maintaining its identity. For example, forest, grassland, estuary, etc. There are the following two main categories of ecosystems: terrestrial ecosystem and aquatic ecosystems. Ecosystems found on the land, example, forest, grassland, deserts, tundra, etc. Aquatic plants and animal community found in water bodies. These can be further classified into two subgroups: freshwater ecosystems, rivers, lakes, ponds, etc., marine ecosystems, oceans, estuary, etc. Terrestrial ecosystems. The interrelations between organisms and environment on the land constitute the terrestrial ecosystem. The most important determining factors of terrestrial ecosystems are the following: moisture and temperature. Terrestrial ecosystems can be classified into different biomes as tundra biome, forests biome, grasslands biome, deserts biome. Tundra biome. Tundra is the coldest of all biomes. The word tundra means a barren island, land, treeless plain, since they are bound in those regions of the world where environmental conditions are very severe. It is known for its frost molded landscapes, extremely low temperatures, little precipitation, poor nutrients, and short growing seasons. There are two types of tundra: Arctic and alpine. Distribution: Arctic tundra extends as a continuous belt below the polar ice cap and above the tree line in the northern hemisphere. It predominantly occupies the northern fringe of Canada, Alaska, European Russia, Siberia, and the island group of Arctic Ocean. On the South Pole, tundra is very small since most of the parts are covered by the ocean. Alpine tundra occurs at high mountains above the tree line. Since mountains are found at all latitudes, Mount Cotopaxi, Himalayas, therefore, alpine tundra exhibits day and night temperature variations. Flora and fauna. Typical vegetation of Arctic tundra consists of cotton grass, sedges, dwarf heath, willows, birches, and lichens. Insects have short life cycles which are completed during favorable period of the year. Animals of tundra are the Arctic hare, caribous, lemmings, reindeer, musk ox, and squirrel. They are protected from the extreme cold by the presence of thick cuticle and epidermal hair. The body is covered with fur for insulation. Mammals of the tundra region have large body size and small tail and ear, mainly to avoid the loss of heat from the surface. Forest biome. Forest includes a complex assembly of different kinds of biotic communities. Optimum conditions such as temperature and ground moisture are responsible for the establishment of forest communities. Forests may be either evergreen or deciduous. They are distinguished on the basis of their leaf into broadleafed or needle-leafed coniferous forest in the case of temperate areas. Forests are classified into three major categories: coniferous forest, temperate forest, and tropical forest. Coniferous forest, also called as boreal forest. Coniferous forests are also known as taiga. They extend as a continuous belt across the North America and northern Eurasia below the Arctic tundra. There is no counterpart of these forests in the southern hemisphere as there is no land at this latitude. Climate is cold with high rainfall, strong seasonal climates with long winters and short summers. Soils of boreal forests are acidic and mineral deficient. They are characterized by thin podozols and are poor. Coniferous forests are characterized by evergreen, drought resistant, and woody. Conifers, gymnosperms, example, spruce, fir, and pine trees, which bear naked seeds in cones, is dominant vegetation. The animals found in this area are the red fox, porcupine, lynx, wolf, bear, squirrel, and amphibians like hyla, rana, etc. Temperate deciduous forest. The temperate forests are characterized by a moderate climate and broad-leafed deciduous trees. Trees of deciduous forests shed their leaves in autumn and new foliage grows in spring. The precipitation is fairly uniform throughout the year. In regions of fairly high rainfall, soils of temperate forests are podzolic and fairly deep, but when temperature differences between winter and summer are less marked, as in Florida, USA, the broad-leaved evergreen subtropical biome is found. Temperate rainforests. This biome is characterized by seasonality with regard to temperature and rainfall. Rainfall is high and fog may be very heavy. Fog is an important source of water than rainfall itself. The biotic diversity of temperate rainforests is high as compared to other temperate forests. The diversity of plants and animals is much low as compared to the tropical rainforests. Common trees are oak, beech, chestnut, birch, pine, etc. These forests also show stratification and have an understory of saplings, shrubs, and all herbs. Prominent grazers include deer, bison, and rodents. Rodents play a very important role in these forests. They feed on seeds, fruits, and tree leaves. Black bear, raccoons, wild cat, wolves, fox, and skunks are the omnivores found in these forests. Hibernation or winter sleep during winter is a common feature of animals found in these forests. Tropical rainforest. These are found in the high rainfall areas on either side of the equator. Such forests are found in the western coast of India, scattered in Southeast Asia, some parts of Africa and South America. They are considered as the most diverse and rich communities on the earth. Both temperature and humidity remain high and more or less uniform throughout the year. The annual rainfall in this region exceeds 200 centimeters and is generally distributed throughout the year. The flora in this region is highly diversified. The extremely dense vegetation of the tropical rainforests remain vertically stratified with tall trees, often covered with epiphytic orchids, vines, creepers, lianas, and bromeliads. The lowest layer is an understory of trees, shrubs, herbs like ferns and palms. These forests are rich in tree-dwelling animals such as monkeys, flying squirrels, snails, centipedes, millipedes, etc. And many insect species are common on the forest floor. The soil of tropical rainforests are red latosols and they are very thick. Subtropical rainforest. It consists of broad-leaved evergreen trees. Subtropical rainforests are found in regions of fairly high rainfall but less temperature differences between winter and summer. Epiphytes are common here. Wildlife of subtropical forests is very similar to that of tropical rainforests. Grassland biome. It is found in the regions where rainfall is about 25 to 75 centimeter per year. That is not enough to support a forest. Grasslands occur in both in tropical and temperate regions where rainfall is not enough to support the growth of trees. Grasslands are found in areas having well-defined hot and dry, warm and rainy seasons. Short trees and tall grass are the vegetation formations that are generally found in temperate climates. Grasses are the dominating plants with scattered drought-resistant thorny trees in the tropical grasslands. Tropical grasslands are commonly called savannas. They occur in eastern Africa, South America, Australia, and India. In India, they are found mainly in the high Himalayas. The rest of India's grasslands are mainly composed of steppes and savannas. Steppe formations occupy large areas of sandy and saline soil found in western Rajasthan, where the climate is semi-arid. Tropical grasslands, savanna. This biome is most extensive in Africa. Grasslands with scattered trees and fire-resisting thorny shrubs are found here. The fauna include a great diversity of herbivorous animals such as zebras, antelopes, buffaloes, elephants, and rhinoceros. The carnivores include hyena, lion, cheetah, and mongoose, and many rodents. Temperate grasslands, steppes and prairies, etc. This region is characterized by low temperature conditions with rather low rainfall. Grasses dominate the vegetation. The fauna here is very diversified and includes animals like bison, antelope, cattle, rodents, prairie dog, wolves, and a rich and diverse array of ground nesting birds. The major difference between steppes and savannas is that all the forage in the steppe is provided only during the brief wet season, whereas in the savannas, forage is largely from grasses that not only grow during the wet season but also from the smaller amount of regrowth witnessed in the dry season. Different names of the grasslands. Grasslands are known by various names in different parts of the world. Prairies in North America, steppes in Eurasia, that is Europe and Asia, savannas in Africa, pampas in South America, grassland or savanna in India. Desert biome. Deserts are hot and low rain areas suffering from water shortage and high wind velocity. They show extremes of temperature. Globally, deserts occupy about one-seventh of the Earth's surface. Deserts are formed in regions with less than 25 centimeter of annual rainfall, or sometimes in hot regions where there is more rainfall but unevenly distributed in the annual cycle. Deserts in temperature regions often lie in rain shadows, that is, where high mountains block off moisture from the seas. The climate of these biomes is modified by altitude and latitude. At higher latitude, the deserts are cold and deserts are hot near equator and tropics. Cacti, acacia, euphorbia, and prickly pears are some of the common desert plants. Desert animals include shrew, fox, wood rats, rabbits, camels, and goat are common mammals in the desert. Other prominent desert animals are reptiles and burrowing rodents, insects. Adaptation to desert ecosystem by plants. The desert plants conserve water by the following methods. They are mostly shrubs, leaves are absent or reduced in size, leaves and stem are succulent and water storing. In some plants, even the stem contains chlorophyll for photosynthesis. Root system is well developed and spread over a large area. The annuals wherever present germinates, bloom and reproduce only during the short rainy season and not in summer and winter. Adaptation to desert ecosystem by animals. The animals are behaviorally and physiologically adapted to desert conditions, such as they are fast runners. They are nocturnal in habit to avoid the sun heat during daytime. They conserve water by excreting concentrated urine. In order to keep the body away from the hot ground, animals and birds usually have long legs. Lizards in desert region can live without drinking water for several days and are mostly insectivorous. Camel is known as a sheep of the desert as it can travel long distances without drinking water for several days. Herbivores animals get sufficient water from the seeds which they eat. Mammals are poorly adapted to deserts. Aquatic ecosystems. Introduction. Aquatic systems are not called biomes. The major differences between the various aquatic zones are due to the following factors: salinity, levels of dissolved nutrients, water temperature, depth of sunlight penetration, etc. Types of aquatic system. Aquatic ecosystems are classified on the basis of salinity into the following two types. One, freshwater ecosystem. The salt content of fresh bodies is very low, always less than 5 ppt parts per thousand. Freshwater bodies can be static or still water lentic and running water lotic. For example, pond, lake, bogs, and swamps are lentic, while springs, mountain, brooks, streams, and rivers are the lotic aquatic systems. Brackish water ecosystem. These water bodies have a salt concentration between 5 to 35 parts per thousand. For example, estuaries, salt marshes, mangrove swamps, and forests. Estuaries. Coastal bays, river mouths, and tidal marshes form the estuaries. Fresh water from rivers meet ocean water, and the two are mixed by the action of tides. Estuaries are highly productive as compared to the adjacent river or sea. Marine ecosystem. These water bodies containing salt concentration equal to or above that of seawater, that is 35 ppt or above. For example, shallow seas and open ocean. Aquatic organisms. The aquatic organisms are classified on the basis of their life form or location into five groups: Newton, periphyton, plankton, nekton, and benthos. Newton. These are unattached organisms which live at the air-water interface, such as floating plants. Example, some organisms spend most of their lives on top of the air-water interface, such as water striders, while others spend most of their time just beneath the air-water interface and obtain most of their food within the water. For example, beetles and black swimmers. Periphyton. These are organisms which remain attached to stems and leaves of rooted plants or substances emerging above the bottom mud. For example, sessile algae and their associated group of animals. Plankton. This group includes both microscopic plants like algae, phytoplankton, and animals like crustaceans and protozoans, zooplankton, found in all aquatic ecosystems except certain swift-moving water animals. The planktons have limited locomotory power so that their distribution is controlled largely by currents in the aquatic ecosystems. Nekton. This group contains animals which are swimmers. The nectons are relatively large and powerful as they have to overcome the water currents. Benthos. The benthic organisms are those found living in the bottom of water mass. Practically every aquatic ecosystem contains well-developed benthos. Corals. Coral is actually a living animal. It has a symbiotic relationship. Each gives something to the other and gets something back in return. With zooxanthellae, microscopic algae which live on coral. Instead of living on the seafloor, the algae lives up on the coral, which is closer to the ocean surface, and so that algae gets lots of light. The tissues of corals themselves are actually not the beautiful corals of the coral reef, but are instead clear white. The corals receive their coloration from the zooxanthellae living within their tissues. There are two types of corals, hard corals and soft corals, such as sea fans and gorgonians. Only hard corals build reefs. The builders of the coral reefs are tiny animals called polyps. As these polyps thrive, grew, then die, they leave their limestone calcium carbonate skeletons behind. The limestone is colonized by new polyps. They are found in tropical and subtropical waters. However, there are also deep water corals in colder regions. They usually occur in shallow tropical areas where the seawater is clean and clear and warm. They are one of the most reproductive and complex coastal ecosystems with high biological diversity. They are classified depending on their locations into the following four types: fringing, patch, barrier, and atoll. Adaptation by animals or plants in water. Lightweight animals and plants float in water and move with the water currents. Animals and plants in the ocean are tolerant to a high concentration of salts. Osmoregulation. Osmoregulation is the process by which a constant osmotic pressure is maintained in the blood. Swimming animals have a streamlined body. Their body is laterally compressed. Deep sea forms show bioluminescence. They emit light. They are dependent on their food on the upper sea zones. Factors affecting the productivity. Sunlight. Sunlight penetration rapidly diminishes as it passes down the column of water, and the depth to which light penetrates a water body determines the extent of plant distribution. Based on the penetration of light and distribution of plants, they are classified as photic zone and aphotic zone. Photic zone. It is the upper layer of the aquatic ecosystems up to which light penetrates, and within it, photosynthetic activity is confined. The depth of this zone depends on the transparency of water. Photic or euphotic zone is the lighted and usually well mixed portion that extends from the surface down to where the light levels is 1% of that other surface. Aphotic zone. The lower layers of the aquatic ecosystems form the aphotic zone where light penetration and plant growth are restricted. Only respiration activity takes place here, but in photic zone, both respiration and photosynthesis takes place. A photic zone is positioned below the littoral and photic zones to bottom of the water body where light levels are too low for photosynthesis. This deep until unlit region is also known as profundal zone. Dissolved oxygen. Oxygen enters the aquatic ecosystems through the air-water interface and with the process of photosynthesis. Dissolved oxygen escapes the water body through respiration of organisms, fish, decomposers, zooplanktons, etc., and air-water interface. The amount of dissolved oxygen retained in water is also influenced by the temperature of the water body. Transparency. Transparency is determined by the extent of light penetration. Suspended particulate matters such as clay, silt, phytoplankton, etc., make the water turbid and therefore less transparent. Consequently, it limits the extent of light penetration and photosynthetic activity in a significant way. Temperature. The water temperature changes less rapidly than temperature of air because the specific heat of water is higher than that of air. Since temperatures of water bodies have less variations, the aquatic organisms have narrow temperature tolerance limits. Lake ecosystem. Lakes, a water body of standing water, generally large enough in area and depth, irrespective of its hydrology, ecology, and other characteristics, is known as a lake. Three main zones can be differentiated in a lake, such as peripheral zone, littoral zone with shallow water, open water beyond the littoral zone where water is quite deep, benthic zone, bottom or the floor of the lake. Lakes are also classified on the basis of their water chemistry. Based on the levels of salinity, they are classified as freshwater, brackish water, saline lakes. On the basis of their nutrient state, they are categorized as oligotrophic, very low nutrients, mesotrophic, moderate nutrients, eutrophic, that is highly nutrient rich. Aging of lakes. Increased nutrient inflow into the lakes promotes the growth of algae, aquatic plants, and various fauna. This process is known as natural eutrophication. Similar nutrient enrichment of lakes that happens at an accelerated rate mainly because of human activities and the consequent aging phenomena is known as cultural eutrophication. Eutrophication. It is a syndrome of an ecosystem. It occurs in response to the addition of artificial or natural substances such as nitrates and phosphates through fertilizer, sewage, etc. that fertilize the aquatic ecosystem. The growth of green algae, which we see in the lake surface layer, is the physical identification of eutrophication. Some algae and blue-green bacteria thrive on the excess ions, then a population explosion covers almost entire surface layer that is known as an algal bloom. Harmful algal blooms. Algae or phytoplankton are microscopic organisms that can be found naturally in coastal waters. They are major producers of oxygen and food for many of the animals that are living in these waters. Algal blooms can be of any color, but red and brown are the most common ones. Some algal blooms produce toxins and do affect fish, birds, marine mammals, and humans.